Hello and welcome to another episode of Casual Friday. We are late. It is indeed Saturday, but our audience will be aware certain stuff was going on in the market on Friday, and we had to be at our desks, busy, keeping up to date, making sure we weren't getting wrecked. With mixed results, I think it suffices to say, Don. But my question is, whose dick do we have to suck to avoid some black swans for a change from this market? I mean, it has been insane. We were talking just off the air before this, and I don't even know how to phrase it. It's just black swan after black swan. Obviously, the immediate rebuttal is if there are so many, then they're not really black swans. And that's just a really scary thing to consider. So I'm not even going to entertain that argument that these are somehow like smaller events. But like if you zoom out, it's been such a treacherous picture for well over a year now, right? Like you're holding tokens, you get wrecked. You're dealing with some of the biggest exchanges, you get wrecked. You're dealing with the most reputable lending firms in the space, you get wrecked. You're dealing with DeFi protocols, you get hacked. You're in stable coins, they depeg or even go to zero if they're algorithmic. All these, as we mentioned, lenders, counterparties, exchanges, nothing has been safe. Like literally nothing has been safe, apart from Tether or something, which is a point we'll come back to. But this is where the meme of, oh, all you have to do in crypto is survive and you'll be fine. I don't think survival has basically ever been harder, at least in my experience, than it has been since in this bear market. Like everything, everyone is affected. We have normie banks going down and nuking our stable coins. It's insane. I don't really know how to process it.
I mean, that's just the funniest thing in the world, right? You're like worried about the crypto sector, and then the fucking normie bank goes down and 10 bucks is over.
Yes.
Like, how does that make any sense? But yeah, it's wild. I mean, the market's been up, down, mostly down, really. But like, there's never been a time where we've had this much bad news. Like, we've had days that have been worse, and price action wise, I mean, it's actually been quite muted in my opinion, considering what's been going on. Like Mount Gox, for example, I mean, that was a bigger deal, but it was just like one event, right? And then everyone got fucked. And I mean, crypto was tiny. Nowadays, you have you have Mount Gox like events like every other day. And you cannot tell me that it's not black swans either, because like this stuff is crazy, right? Yeah, you have like this. I mean, and we're gonna talk about the like USDC, but you have like the biggest stable coins that are technically that technically have the money, right? Just technically, not practically. That like DPEG, it's just fucking nuts. So yeah, anyone that's made it this far, I think deserves some props. Because it's truly not been easy, and the pitfalls have been many. And I think falling in 1 or 2 or 3, like if you've fallen in like 2 or 3, you're actually probably still doing pretty well. It's the odd thing in crypto where if you have all your eggs in one basket, there's a good chance that you're gonna just lose your basket. So if you've just avoided like a couple of them, you've done a good job, I think. And some of them it's just unavoidable or like very, very hard to avoid. And I think the USDC one, that one was quite tough to predict, because they did most of the stuff by the book and still got fucked. So, but yeah, we'll talk about it later in the show.
Yeah, it's just crazy, right? Like a lot of DeFi just runs on USDC, and they have BlackRock and Bank of New York, and have their in terms of the degree of transparency relative to the history of stablecoins, about as good as it gets. And then just some Silicon Valley bank nuking, and then suddenly USDC was trading under 90 cents, like some algorithmic shitcoin. It's really shocking. It's like to live in a world where you've technically like, oh, I've risked off, I'm in stable coins, and you wake up and you're eating 10% drawdown.
Yes.
Like what the fuck is that? And then you open Twitter and everyone's trade, like the highest volume pairs are stablecoin to stablecoin pairs, and people are getting liquidated on those with leverage. Like even saying that sentence out loud sounds absolutely insane. These are the types of anecdotes that like future bull market, please God, just give us one more. But future bull market participants will just find so completely unrelatable, right? They're like everyone's trading stablecoin against stablecoin. They're like, oh well, I just bought cum dog Inu and made 5,000%. Why are you all guys so serious? And I hold all my funds on this new offshore exchange. It's like, kiddo, you have it easy, you know?
Yes.
And you know, also the amount of Coinbase headlines coming in, like they stopped USDC to USD conversions, and it's just crazy. Like the de-dollarization and this sort of stablecoin on-ramp, off-ramp attack on crypto has been so strong, and that's only like half the headlines, which is insane as well. And this isn't even like, this wasn't even the product of like a direct attack. That's the crazy part, right? Like we have the whole Operation Choke Point, Chokehold, whatever going on, and then at the same time we're getting nuked by proxy because of how these stablecoin issuers are managing their treasuries. So it's like an all-out assault. And yeah, it's not particularly great, as the watch list of altcoins to my right would suggest. I mean, look, when I was going through the content bit from the blocks and saving articles and stuff, it was such a depressing thing to do, Don. Because I go to the front page, I'm like, oh shit, okay, yeah, this also happened. That's terrible. Oh, I almost forgot about this because we've had so much bad news since then, you know? It's definitely one of those weeks. And I mean, price is reflecting it to some decent extent, at the very least, you know? The whole shaking off bad news, relative strength, etc. I think the first crack showed up when we decoupled from the S&P just in the wrong direction.
Yes.
And then ever since that point, we've been quite sensitive to bad news, understandably. But there are some odd mechanics at play as well, which we'll talk about when it comes to if your stablecoin is wrecked. One of the choices you have is to take directional risk on the market, right? You just buy Bitcoin and ETH and suck it up, essentially, to reduce your exposure there. In any case, before we jump ahead too far, I do want to talk about BTC USD, ETH USD technical stuff and TA and charts and levels. I think the monthly is a suitable one to start from because monthly resistance respecters are eating well. You know, they
As
are
usual.
they
As
are
usual.
sated, yeah, for sure. And look, the monthly time frame is just a good time frame. I don't know if you were closely following Twitter around the time of the monthly close. There was so much random fucking dunking going on, which to me just reeked of either inexperience, hubris, or both. Because it was based like, oh yeah, lol, this time frame has only this many candles, and it takes an entire month to close. No one serious is trading this time frame, and it's not useful, so on and so forth. Which I think just flies in the face of history, essentially, with how useful this time frame has been. And in hindsight, and also with foresight, because this is the level we've been shilling for weeks and weeks and weeks, I mean, this is just a very technical move from monthly support into, from monthly resistance into our last area of monthly support.
Yes.
And for weeks on Casual Friday, we talked about no visible pullback yet, no visible pullback yet. You know, you asked me if I wanted to bid any altcoins or any sort of mid 20 BTC levels, and my answer was, you know, when I bid in front of my high time frame levels, I normally eat shit. In the newsletter, we had to use that strained language, like, you know, high time frame, visible, yada yada, and you know, it's here now. In case it wasn't obvious, as far as that goes. The way I articulated the argument on Twitter was essentially, you know, if 20K doesn't hold on the monthly, then we're probably going to come very close to making new lows at the very least. If not, I think the yearly open is a higher probability target at that point because there's no real structure. Like, look, we can't argue at the same time that the monthly time frame is really good and then be super bullish if there's no structure in the monthly time frame and or if monthly structure of support is broken, right? Those two things are somewhat inconsistent. So I think for me, at least, my monthly technical view is that the rotation from resistance to support has taken place, and now it's just to be determined whether support actually holds. And if not, I think there are very clear downside targets for that. But given the extreme situation we're in, where you have like literally one level and it's the only level and it's a do or die type of level, it makes sense to look for at least one punt there, because if not here, then where type of thing. What do you think of how the monthly is developing? Granted, 3 more weeks left on this red boy.
I mean, it's the best level that we have, right? By far. I think it's a good support. 20 to 19K, that's good, decent support. The saddest part is, like, I analyzed this perfectly. I actually even sold the top perfectly. I mean, I sold 25K. That's as close to the top as you can be, really. And then I went full retard and rebought 23K and ate shit on the way down. Is what it is. Shit happens, but obviously not perfect. Especially given that if I didn't do that, and this is just like when you're just not respecting the high time frames, and I actually fell for it this time. Then you have less bullets to fire at support, right? Because I would be more than happy to, instead of having bought 23k, which is now like pretty shitty entry, obviously, if I just had my ammunition ready to go at 20k, would have been much better. Because not only is that like just a better entry, so you make more money if it goes your way, and you lose less if it doesn't, but also like your invalidation is much clearer, right?
Yes.
Because now I'm sitting here with a shitty, obviously, I mean, technically I'm still in the swing trade and I just captured 2k of the down move and bought back in, right? Because my plan was to hold this anyway. From my entry in below 16k, but yeah, could have captured much more of it, would have been much more comfy. But it's the best support that we have. And I think still, like, I made a chart like 2 or 3 weeks ago where I said best case, worst case.
Yes.
And best case was basically just going up straight, and worst case was like doing exactly what we've been doing, and then going sideways here and then going up afterwards. I still think that's the case. Now, obviously, with the news that we're having, if anything there goes super sideways, like this has far reaching consequences, right? Like if you start, like if Circle has problems, and I'm not entirely sure how this is gonna go down. My gut feeling is that it's actually gonna be okay, but I don't want to, like, the problem is by saying that people are going to be like, okay, I can just hold all my money because I've been holding USDC 100% of my money. I mean, I don't want to give that kind of advice, right?
Sure.
Because then people are going to be like, in the off chance that something bad happens, they're going to be completely fucked, right? So just just to make sure where I'm coming from, like I bought a bunch of USDC actually this morning, got in below 0.9.
Nice.
And but I'm planning to kind of sell it at 0.95, 0.97, 98, whatever. But yeah, so like in general, I think this could resolve, and then it's like you have a major FUD event going into a monthly support level. That's not necessarily the worst setup in the world, especially given if we're looking for a higher low, right? And not necessarily a higher low on any other time frame than the monthly, but that's significant, right? Because the monthly, if you look through history, you get these kind of moves into support, and then quite aggressive moves back out of it. And that's kind of what I'm hoping this is going to be. But I don't know. We'll see. I don't want to be too bullish after like a major event like this, and after going into a day like Monday where we're gonna see if the banking system is actually gonna be okay or not.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, this is a decent level. I'm like, this is like, I bought a little bit of Bitcoin, and I bought a bunch of USDC. So we'll see how that goes.
What a sad sentence, right? As a crypto trader.
Yes. I mean, that's the funniest part, right? The most volatile thing, besides like some of the shit coins, like Lido is 12% down today, but the most volatile stuff has been like fucking stable coins.
Yeah.
And it's not even been like the shitty stable coins, right? Like, I mean, like Luna, right? The UST that we had. Like, I wasn't necessarily like super shocked, to be quite honest. Like that always seemed odd to me, that like it's just an odd product, right?
Sure.
USDC is the one, like the second most trusted. And it's quite funny because we talked about this on the show before, where someone, I don't know if you asked me just flat out or if someone asked in comments what our most favorite like stable coins were. And I said, like, I trust Tether the most. And people were like, what the fuck are you smoking?
Yeah.
And now it's the only stable coin that's left standing, for better or worse. So it's quite a funny situation, really. But yeah, I derailed it completely. Monthly support good.
Yearly open bad.
Yearly open very bad. fuck the Wick believers. I don't want to live in a world where the Wick believers get their
Wick believer redemption arc. That'd be so sweet. It's like, this is how TA makes a comeback, and I scam people with my new course. It's the only way it's gonna work, Don. I need that Wick. I need it real bad.
I mean, if you get that Wick, I'm gonna have to join your cause, because
Yeah, as a guest professor. Yeah.
Yes, just give me like $100, and it's okay.
Bold of you to assume I'll sell that many. In any case, yeah, that's funny. Like, even talking about the monthly time frame kind of makes me smile because you're forced to make this uncomfortable argument that, well, it's the best level we have. Where it reminds me of like a mother with one son, and she's like, oh, well, you're my favorite boy. You're like my favorite son. Like, you've only got one. How is that a useful statement?
Fair enough.
So like, that part always sort of makes me uncomfortable. But yeah, on the monthly, like, look, if anything, the past couple of weeks of price action have solidified the case for respecting, or like at the very least taking monthly time frame levels seriously. So I'm willing to do that much. And also, like, if it fails, I don't know, my view is where, like, I mean,
14K.
give Capo the keys to the city,
Oh,
like,
I cannot live in that world.
Like, his presidential campaign's going to be busting for real, because that'll be a glorious time for social media. But like, realistically, to me at least, if someone just asked me at the pub, and also never do this, ask me about crypto if I happen to leave the house once every 3 months, but like, oh, what do you think of BTC below 20? My answer would be 0. I mean, that's not like a literal answer, but I think those monthly and weekly levels at sort of 10, 12, 14, the stuff we were talking about before the summer range reclaim, by definition, all of that comes into force. So none of that is particularly inviting. There's nothing positive for me below this 1920 monthly level. I mean, even if you look at it on the weekly, what did we print/form at that bottom sort of November December range that you'd want to rebuy? For me, the answer is nothing. It's just a bunch of small bodied candles that there's no structure there that I'm interested in. Like, for me, that was the deviation portion, right? And it's not the deviation portion that makes for strong support resistance. It's the like original range low. So there's nothing there that I want to rebuy. And then so we'll see, I guess. As far as other timeframes go, I wonder what you think of the weekly in its current form. I think it's
there's a setup there, I think, on the weekly time frame.
Is it the cluster from the 20th of June, or are you looking lower towards the 27th of June low?
So I'm looking, like, I have this setup where basically I boxed out the September low. So 19th of September on the weekly time frame. That's big support. And then the top of that move, right? So from that towards like 21K, where FTX went bankrupt, right? So I have the lower part boxed out, the lowest red candle basically, and I have a support basically at 21K, right? So we almost made it to that weekly support box, and I think, and I mean, obviously depends how the next 24 to like 30 hours go, but I think if we can push it towards 21K into the weekly close, and this is quite a tall order because it's the weekend, right? And not only is it the weekend, but we have major FUD going around,
and everyone's waiting for Monday as well, right?
Yeah, because people are legitimately worried that like this is gonna be banking contagion, right? I've seen a bunch of YouTube shows where they're like, okay, this is like the start of another financial crisis like 2008. I wouldn't necessarily
all over again.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't go this far, but I'm not an expert in this, right? Like, my opinion is completely meaningless in that regard. It doesn't really, like, I think there's tools to kind of stop this, and I think if it gets bad, there's probably gonna be some of that in use, but who knows, right? I don't want to make any predictions on that front, but that's kind of the headwind that we have in the next 30 hours plus. And that's when the weekly closes, right? In 30 hours. So we need to move quite a bit to that high, like in that time, to kind of close okay, because then we close at support after hitting monthly support, after hitting deep weekly support, and then bouncing back off of it. Like, that looks okay to me. Could still wick the next week, but I think at that point, like, the structure at least looks somewhat fine. The problem is, and this should be pretty obvious, but just looking at the weekly time frame, that we broke the low, right? We made a low on the 5th or 6th of February, bounced off of it strong, and we broke that low. It's not necessarily the most important one in the world because it was just like a tiny pullback, but that's a little bit worrisome. So we need a little bit of strength, because if you start losing supports after breaking new lows. That's not the best look in the world. So there is a setup there, a possible one. And I mean, I've been very clear in saying that you need to reclaim 23K before this actually looks good on the daily time frame.
Oh, the
And
daily is a clusterfuck, man, isn't it?
oh yeah,
I was
yeah.
looking at that earlier. The way you fudded it on weekly open, I was surprised that you stayed long. Because if I took a shot every time you said resistance, I would have been in the ICU immediately, like within an hour. Because your analysis was like, we closed below this daily range high, then we lost this, then we closed below this, and then this is resistance. I was like, oh my god, like this is that was rough, and it still is, right? So on the daily time frame, at least the stuff that makes sense to me. If we take even just the most straightforward one, the daily cluster, kind of the January consolidation,
Yep.
all of that is above us now.
Yeah, we fucking cooked it.
We cooked it, yeah, and that's not great. And even if it
No.
pushes into that cluster, if you just look to the left, it's that sort of October, November range consolidation block thingy, which aligns at the same level. And we basically nuked through all of that, and today arguably even retested it a little bit.
Yes.
So even if Monday like starts to rally, I'm not sure that's a rally I'd be comfortable buying into, at least on a daily time frame, sort of medium time frame trading perspective, because that just seems like a rally into resistance, you know.
Yes,
And
I
bearing in
agree,
mind that the
actually.
monthly time frame can take longer to play out, that's a fade for me, if anything, especially at the extremity. So that sucks. Like the daily got cooked, man. Straight up. Like the daily got fucking battered. Good thing is, I know that's a cursed phrase to use, but you know the double fake out setups we keep talking about like ad nauseam because they're so fucking good in crypto.
Yes.
It's actually super straightforward. I truly believe you can build a full out trading career in crypto by trading failed breakouts and by trading double fake outs. And that probably represents like 80% of my own trades across like all time frames and stuff. But you know the level I had on the daily at around the sort of 22nd of January little cluster, you know, the first few small consolidation
Oh yeah, yeah.
days that we had after the mega candle. And so I kind of had that as a range low. And then I had the same range high as you at 23.7 or whatever.
Yes.
And so when we had that nuke candle on the 3rd of March, and people were discussing whether this is going to be a high or low, we were fudding it hard on Technical Roundup, saying in the most polite sort of in the most courteous way that argument just isn't compelling. But my own reason for not buying into that is because that daily close for me was like a second break. So the first break took place on like the 9th of February-ish, and then we reclaimed that. And then to me, breaking that again, it's like, well, is it going to be a second fake out? Usually not. And then is there anything there that would suggest a higher low, given we haven't reached monthly resistance? Monthly support? Probably not. And yeah, that's sort of what we have. But I think the daily, like the monthly looks, you know, you kind of need the monthly to work because otherwise we're fucked. The weekly, I think, is a toss-up at best. If anything, on the weaker side, more than anything, because it kind of the more shallow, clear market structure pullback levels have failed, and it hasn't yet reached like the extremity. You know, like even your sort of even your weekly sort of range low block thing hasn't been like thoroughly tested. If you just take the red candle. I don't know if you. That's right, isn't it? We haven't reached it if you take the 19th of September, at least on my Binance feed. Could be wrong. So you basically have monthly support, but it's early, and that shit can take a while to play out. The weekly, as you mentioned, essentially broke market structure by making a sort of intermediate time frame lower low, and also looks like it's going to close below 21K, which was the sort of shallow and clearer retest pullback level thingy, and it's doing so without having reached the other extreme of the range, the support closer to the 19 handle. So at best, that's no man's land with a break in market structure below support, and the daily time frame just got fucking cooked. Because it puked through everything. All of that to say, this has to be the bottom because all the time frames look like shit. How'd that work out last time, Don?
I mean, the funny thing is, like, I hate how I fudded this because at the end of the day, like, I caused my own downfall.
Yeah. You faded
People
the
fucking-
newsletter. That was your mistake, Don.
Oh, I didn't only fade the newsletter, I faded my own analysis too. But no, I was just like, I'm gonna weather the storm, and I don't really like. It's not the worst in the world. It's not like I just gave a bunch of profits back,
Sure.
and I still want to be in this trade, right? Like for me, this kind of like the buy that I had at like 15 something, I still think that's the bottom. I still think there's good likelihood that the macro bottoms in, depending on if this whole banking thing actually gets worse or not. If it does get worse, I think we might make new lows, but that's going to be very, very short. And then it's going to be like the COVID lows, because like something that I don't think people really talk about is that this is actually like the whole banking problems are actually quite bullish for Bitcoin. I think like it's the reason Bitcoin exists, right? And it's kind of the main argument that you can bring forward for it having value. So I think like that would be the narrative that kind of makes this thing go. But I think trading wise, right? You at least want to see a close above 21K on the weekly. You need to see the monthly support hold. Like if we close in 20 days, and obviously that's quite a bit away, but if we close below it,
That's like 10 regional banks away.
Yeah, but if we do that, right, and it's just something that you can keep on your own chart and then just kind of get an alert near end of month, or if you just like a normal human being, you just know that the month's ending and then you can just check it. Either or. I mean, I know that a lot of crypto people don't look at dates.
Unrelatable,
including,
yeah, exactly.
Including me. I usually don't know what day of the week it is, but like that's a given. You have to hold monthly support. Then you have to close above 21K on the weekly. Like I was flooding because we didn't reclaim 23K. And now I like the good thing is like if you've been bearish at that level, you have the same kind of thing now going where you can be bearish unless we reclaim one, the weekly support at 21K.
Yeah.
And then two, the daily resistance above 21.2. So we need to get through that daily cluster and we need to close the week strong. Otherwise, I think it's going to take either more weeks or just in general, just be bearish, right? So you have this opportunity where you can just stay out of the market and you have a clear-cut answer to, okay, where do I want to actually rebuy? Because this is pretty straightforward. And I think in general, if you want to be very, very conservative, you can just wait for basically the range high that I have from the 15th of June of 2022, which is at 22.5K, for that to be reclaimed. If we go above there, I think it's off to the races and we're going to rally fucking hard. And that's not too far away, right? So like if you miss that as someone that's cautious, you just miss 10% before I think what we're going to get is basically the move to 30K. And that would be 40% plus. So you sacrifice the first 10% by being a little bit cautious because you don't want to be the guy that buys at 20K before it goes to 12K, like Capo says. And then you can just kind of do that, which is a really nice bear invalidation. And I think that's kind of trading wise the simplest it can get. It's just requires some patience basically, and that's why like given we have all of this kind of like we have resistance on the daily, we didn't manage to hold the weekly so far, and like I said, it's the weekend. All of that is like a little bit worrisome. That's why I bought a bunch of a stable coin instead of Bitcoin, because I think like that's probably going to turn out okay. And then I can still rotate those profits if I want to once I get a good setup, instead of just doing it because I feel like it's low. Honestly, in general, whenever I get these kind of nukes into bad news, like the one that we have right now, and people are kind of worried about the world falling apart, that's usually buy for me, right? The moment you get like the trusted stable coins, like I always say, the moment USDT loses its peg, you actually want to just start buying, right? And it's been true for the longest time, like not necessarily USDT, but in general crypto, because that's when panic is the highest. And I think USDC is in a similar situation. It's just a question like there's actually some problems they can run into that are actually quite serious.
That's the light pushback I was going to have, is that a lot of the times we've seen USDT panic has just been people shitting themselves, essentially.
Yes.
Whereas this has like a mechanism and a cause with sort of real facts, essentially. So sort of you can distinguish it on that front. But yeah, all of that makes sense. So I think colloquially we're left in a position where if you want hope, you'll get it from the monthly. The weekly and the daily aren't going to give it to you in their current forms. And if they do, it'll have to take place above 21k, somewhat conservatively. Is that a fair
Yes.
summary?
Yeah, and I think in general, like when you hit monthly support like this, and then you get a favorable close on the weekly,
Yeah.
like that's a good signal in itself. And then, like I think even being conservative and just like even if you get the close at 21k on the weekly time frame, which would almost get you through the daily resistance, if you just get a little bit more on the push and then another close above that like cluster that we talked about on the daily
Yes.
time frame, then you suddenly have all the time frames in the world that agree with you,
And
right?
an invalidation, which helps.
Yeah, and exactly, and then it's not like I was on weekly open where I have to say, hey, we close, like this is shit, this is shit, this is shit. But instead you have like, hey, there's promise here on the monthly, there's promise on the weekly, and you have a daily setup. Like that's the combination that you want. You don't want the combination that we had last Monday, where I still like I'm angry with myself because I could have made quite a bit more out of this move,
Sure.
and instead I ate a little bit of shit. But
Yeah.
it's what it is.
I'm not going to let you self-flagellate completely. The way I traded this sort of rotation and monthly range high, I pulled out a Cred Classic, which is essentially when, like, the way my strategy works, a lot of it when it comes to being high time frame oriented, is for my swing strat is basically I'll trade high time frame level into high time frame level, so like monthly to monthly, weekly to weekly, daily to daily. For my intra strategy, I'll still usually trade, with some exceptions, high time frame levels, but then I'll just trade them to low time frame levels, right? So instead of going from monthly to monthly, I'll go from like a monthly to hourly or monthly to 4 hour, and basically take tighter invalidation trades, shorter time duration into close, like smaller rotations into nearby lower time frame trouble areas. There's a much higher trade frequency, much lower holding duration essentially, and I'm just trading the reaction from the level rather than like the full rotation from high time frame to the next high time frame. The issue that I've come across not infrequently, including on this occasion, is that when my intra strategy is doing so well, as it did at monthly resistance for both BTC and ETH, I kind of just zero in on that and ignore my swing strategy, for lack of a better term. So, I usually end up trading the same level like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times, and most of those trades are good, that I just basically zero in on that process and focus on the intra strategy, not realizing that at some point I'm going to have to hold one of those entries through the low time frame areas and to allow it to transition into a swing to take it from high time frame to high time frame instead of high time frame to low time frame. But I just get into the groove of trading it from high time frame to low time frame that, I'll like close it at the low time frame trouble area, and then the high time frame rotation will kick in, which is like 2, 3, 4 times the size. And because I've got my intra strategy cap on, I basically miss out on the rotation that was the base of the swing idea in the first place. I don't know if that made any sense at all, or even if that was remotely lucid. But that was sort of my pitfall there. Whereas, arguably, although I haven't gone through the numbers, perhaps it's close. But if I had just like taken the high time frame signal of like, you know what? Yeah, I'm sure I could take this monthly and close it at the hourly and reopen it and all do that type of stuff. But instead, I'm just going to sell my monthlies. I'm going to close my other monthlies. I'd probably be better off. So that's kind of a frustrating difficulty that I still have, like a friction that I still have to work through. That both of my the strategies that I employ consistently require me to trade the same level, but at a certain point allow for a switch to go from the intra approach to the higher time frame one. And that's confounded by the fact that you obviously start with the intra approach. Because if you're dealing with like monthly and weekly levels, that shit can take months and weeks to play out, right?
Yes.
But the intra strategy allows me to trade those levels on basically immediately / at any time. So preferentially, I'll start with those because I'm not expecting the high time frame rotation until much later, and then hope that I can transition into the high time frame rotations. And recently, it's been the case that the intras do well, but when it comes to like the actual big telegraphed move, I'm just too focused on the lower time frame stuff, and this time was no exception. So there's that.
Yeah, I know that feeling. That's kind of like how it often went for me back in the day. And honestly, like whenever I switch back from like a system that is kind of like that, like I'm always like, oh, I just want to get the meat of the move and like the big moves, and then I sit through a round trip. So it's like it both has advantages
I was
and
going to ask you
disadvantages.
actually, because we had so much philosophical waxing and waning about I don't want to be that guy who lets his great entries go, etc. This time is different, and then if you just listen to that DonAlt, he's much happier than the present one. Has that shifted your conviction at all in your rebirth essentially when it comes to holding periods? Or are you like, Charlie charge it to the game. It's just variance. That's showbiz, baby. On to the
I
next.
think it's
Happy to be stopped out.
Happy to be stopped
Yeah.
out. Yeah, I think it's just part of the game. Like the thing is, like, I mean, I'm gonna have a family, so I'm not gonna be able to just do what I used to do, which is just basic. And I mean, I especially noticed this in the last 24 hours, where I wanted to spend time with my girlfriend, and I just had to sit in front of the computer and do stuff. And I don't necessarily want to have that in my life. So, like, for me, even though like past me would have made much more money on this and wouldn't have given back as much as I did, um, it's just how it goes. Like, big pullbacks are part of the game, right? I mean, I rode a move basically from 16K to 25K back to 20K. It's just like, I mean, you get pullbacks during big moves, and if you have like a conviction in like upside, like as in, like, I think it can easily go to 30K. And with the new backdrop of like the banks kind of fucking up left and right, I think it can even go higher. So like for me, like, I'm just gonna charge it to the game. It's just how it is. I will have to. I mean, there's like, I'm better at kind of like constantly closing and opening position and kind of being nimble. Like, that's kind of a big part of my edge, I think. But it's also not the lifestyle that I want to lead. So it's kind of like, it's in conflict, and it takes some fine tuning, obviously. But I don't really mind it too much. Like, it pisses me off, obviously. And I mean, yesterday we like, I was just like, I don't want to do the show right now because I'm just busy doing shit. And I couldn't concentrate anyway because I like, everything was just kind of going wild. And I don't necessarily want to be in that position all the time. Like yesterday, there was too much opportunity to take advantage of, and also just me being like worried that we would have like a bigger contagion even. Today is a little bit more chill, but I don't want to be in this situation all the time. So I'm just gonna charge the game, be like less nimble, but
Be happy to be stopped out. Yeah.
be happy to be stopped out, and it's just how it goes.
You just need to
So-
rebrand it. Be like, my girlfriend is so hot that I simply can't reasonably justify trading with a higher frequency because that would mean time away from her.
I mean, it's literally true though.
Thankfully, luckily for our audience, I don't have that problem, so I'll be here on the 5 minute with you boys. Solidarity. Yeah, fair enough, man. All of that makes sense. Charge it to the game. I think that's fairly decent as far as Bitcoin goes. Not a whole lot else to say. At the risk of repeating myself for the summary, I mean, you should just go sign up to trletter.com. The newsletter system just fucking smashed it straight up.
Yes.
I think there's another like that's the real sort of chat GPT type of thing. This autonomous intelligence, which is sort of going out of control because it trades better than both of us. And it basically just took the monthly and weekly resistance and just wrote, hey, be bearish until monthly and weekly support. And then we just skipped like 2 newsletters because the conviction was so high,
Yeah.
So there's at least that. So there's the consolation prize, Don. But yeah, monthly, wait for support, hope for support, pray for support. Do whatever verb is appropriate for support at 19-20K. Weekly, the earliest you could start having the deck stacked in your favor if you're looking for upside is a weekly close above 21K. That doesn't get it out of the woods completely, but it would at least be a positive sign. And then on the daily, it's kind of just a confluent clusterfuck, which is a technical term, of resistance between 20 and 21. So similarly, if the daily starts working its way through there, you'd expect the weekly to come into play, and then you'd have a clear invalidation, and then it would give evidence of monthly support. Like, a lot of positive stuff really starts to come together quite quickly above sort of like 21, 22K-ish.
Yes.
And I think that's worth waiting for, especially given how close we are to it.
Mm-hmm. And something... Sorry.
No, not all. Go on.
And something else that you can just watch on top of that is basically the exchange rate between USDC and USDT. Like, if that gets close to 1, that's a pretty big fear factor out of the market. So I mean, that's going to be interesting Sunday, I think, because like if USDC recovers to like 0.98 or whatever, like, that's pretty close to where I think a lot of people would start feeling comfortable again.
Yes.
So you can have that on top of the list too. Like, you have a bunch of technicals on Bitcoin. You want to have a little bit of like the backdrop, as in USDC isn't completely fucked. Like, that combination would be nice.
Yes.
Now something that we can kind of segue
Sure, segue works.
segue into is basically like the USDC discussion,
Yes.
because I think it makes sense. And I mean, that's just really fucking wild, right? I don't have any insider information, any kind of like special privileged opinions on this. But from kind of what I mean, it looks like to me anyway, like a lot of people are kind of panicking into the weekend where you cannot really redeem anyway. And that can actually have effects like we saw on what was the bank called? I always confuse the two, like Silvergate and
Silicon Valley Bank.
exactly Silicon Valley Bank, which basically just got bank run to death. I've seen a little bit of info that they kind of just completely mismanaged their funds. Did a bunch of stupid shit basically with it.
Let he who is without sin cast the first stone.
I mean, we all know how that feels,
exactly,
right?
Exactly. He's just like me for real.
I mean, you'd think that a bank does a little bit better than us degens, but I mean, it is what it is. But so basically, sorry, I'm getting like a bunch of messages, which gets me distracted. But basically, like I think it can turn around quite quickly if we get any intervention at all, and that's kind of what we have to hope for on Monday. But I don't know if you have news articles or anything that we can start.
Yeah, I've got some stuff ready. So I think it might help to sort of zoom out and contextualize like what the fuck actually happened / is going on. So USDC is a stablecoin. It's a crypto dollar operated by Circle, and the idea there is that you have one Circle dollar or one USDC, and that's redeemable for one USD. And the collateral / reserves for that are held in sort of liquid cash equivalents, treasuries, and that kind of stuff in order to be redeemable and accessible to customers, basically, and trading firms and so on and so forth. And obviously for this thing to work properly, and unfortunately that has an even more sort of literal definition, because we know a lot of DeFi protocols are hard coded to for USDC to be $1. So like a lot of DeFi stuff starts to get a bit wonky if that peg breaks. But essentially, it's supposed to be 1-to-1, just like any other stablecoin. And this thing depegged. Why did it depeg? Well, because it turns out that completely sort of almost adjacent, aside from what we're discussing in macro world, there was a sort of bank called Silicon Valley Bank, as in this article by The Block, where USDC had, I think, where Circle held about $3 billion, right? Something of that nature.
Like 8% of what they had, I think.
Yes, it's something like that. It's like 8 to 10%. And obviously the numbers start getting a bit wonky here because they're invested in different instruments, and there are cash and cash equivalents and bonds with different maturities, and they're also making profits from the interest rates, and it gets a bit murky in terms of the breakdown. But basically a significant chunk of their liquid money, they now presumably, barring some sort of intervention either sort of late on the weekend or on Monday, that Circle doesn't have access to, because the bank where they held those 3 billion, again Silicon Valley Bank, got bank run and essentially got liquidated, right? And
Yes.
has been, I suppose more technically, been taken into receivership by the FDIC because of a duration mismatch or whatever, a liquidity crunch. They couldn't meet the volume and amount of withdrawals from their customers. It's just like, no bank holds 100% reserves, to my understanding, as far as
No, they don't.
especially with commercial banks. And so if everyone wants to take their money out all at once, they can't ordinarily meet those types of withdrawals. Now, there are supposed to be measures to mitigate that, like risk management in terms of being invested into more liquid stuff that they can sell off to meet any significant spikes in withdrawals. There are other things and sort of Basel agreements and all sorts of other nonsense that are supposed, Fed stress tests also come to mind. So in theory, there are these mechanisms so that even if there is an unplanned increase in like liquidity demands from customers, that shouldn't resolve in the bank going tits up, which is also a very technical term. But on this occasion, and among all other articles and allegations, they were invested in not liquid instruments and were suffering huge losses, to some extent spurned by the rapid shift in interest rates by the Fed in general. But whoever's fault it is, they couldn't meet their obligations to their customers, and so the bank was taken into receivership. So the market started speculating as a result that, hey, USDC is holding a bunch of their dollars in this place where they will no longer seemingly have access to their dollars, right? That's what the market started to price in at the very least. And as a result, people wanted to exit and sell their USDC for other crypto assets or other stable coins, and basically move away from this thing that is supposed to be $1, but the evidence suggests that it might not be $1. And again, mechanistically, the assumption that's going on there is that if/when redemptions open, they'll get soaked up so quickly that you may not be able to, if you don't have the sort of priority queue, if you will, or if you just get unlucky, or if you're not like a registered customer, or if you don't have a pre-existing relationship, whatever it is, that when the withdrawals open, given this sort of market information, that you're not going to get your dollars if you're holding USDC, right?
And I mean, in general, like it's not like this loss is like a particularly bad one, because they make quite a bit of money. I mean, in general, like Tether too, they make a shitload of money just having like all that money. The problem is that you could technically argue that, I mean, they invest some of that money that they have obviously too, just kind of to make more. And then you kind of can get into the same trouble that the bank had, which is basically, hey, they have to sell these bonds that they bought to meet kind of the requirements of the clients that all want their money back. And you get a second bank run, basically. Like you had a bank run on the bank that wiped them out like 8%. Obviously, I mean, they're probably going to get their money back, or like at least a good portion of it. But the concern is basically that you can get a bank run on the stablecoin itself. And then if they only like, if they lose like 15-20%, there's going to be people that are not going to get anything back, right? Because the first people that get to redeem their coins, they're going to get their full money out because they can just redeem and there's money left. But the further down the queue you go, the more likely it is that at some point there's just not going to be any money. And I mean, this is very FTX-like, where like people could withdraw until there was no money left, and then you couldn't anymore. And that's kind of the worry for a lot of people. And that's why it's going so crazy, because at face value, those like 8%, it's not the biggest deal, because they could easily they could easily kind of cushion that. It's the fact that maybe there's going to be a little bit more, and they're going to have to do the same thing that the banks did, basically. And we'll see how that turns out.
We will, quite soon, actually. But with all that mumbling from me especially, I guess the simple story is USDC supposed to be USD, right?
Mm-hmm.
Number 2, Circle holds USD. Customer can redeem USDC 1 equals USD 1. And then number 4, Circle loses a bunch of USD. Market speculates that 1 USDC perhaps doesn't equal 1 USD. And then, as a result, tries to withdraw, swap, sell, remove USDC exposure, and USDC breaks peg. Number 8, DeFi and other shit breaks 2.9 Bitzlato 2.0 contagion.
No, Bitzlato was a little bit more serious.
This is what gets to me. People are so late talking about like the banking sector contagion and how this is the domino that really sets off the financial crisis, because we've been ahead of it. We saw the tea leaves when Bitzlato went down. That was really the first tremor. I'm so astounded by people's short-sightedness, waiting for something as irrelevant as Circle and USDC to take a hit when Bitzlato was the harbinger of doom all along. And fade Bitzlato at your own peril. But yeah, I think that's a decent summary, right? USDC is supposed to be USD. Circle holds USD. As long as that's the case, customer can redeem 1 USD for one USDC for 1 USD. But if Circle loses that USD that is supposed to be backing the USDC, the market speculates that they won't be able to get that on a 1-to-1 ratio, be it for liquidity purposes, duration mismatch, the big boys just all withdraw and it goes to and there's nothing left for anyone else, and therefore instead of getting like 80 cents you get 0 cents. I think people forget the maths on that, right? like if the liquidity disappears, you're not getting 80 cents, you're getting 0 if they have to
Yes.
halt withdrawals or something like that. And as a result, people want to remove their exposure to USDC for all those reasons. And USDC breaks peg and stuff breaks and contagion, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Do you think we covered that somewhat like sort of not even comprehensively, because not at all, but intelligibly, like understandably?
Yes.
Okay.
And I mean, I want to make clear that, I mean, I said earlier that Silicon Valley Bank did like a bunch of stupid shit, and I'm sure they did. I mean, I saw like a little bit of it and I was like, okay, seems a little bit crazy to me. But also, like, with just the kind of rate hiking that we've seen, it's really easy to fall into this trap, right? Because I mean, just imagine, like, you don't really get any interest for your money, and your customers are kind of complaining. They want to have, like, they want to deposit and actually get something out of it. So you have to kind of go further and further out, buy like longer term bonds, basically, because they were still paying quite like a little bit. And then you suddenly get this rate hike that wasn't really telegraphed, right? I mean, people should have, like, it should have come much earlier, but we were also like, everyone was assured that it wasn't gonna happen.
Inflation
right?
was transitory, bro.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it was just like this big thing, like inflation is transitory, like this is not gonna be a problem. And then suddenly we get like insane rate hikes, right? And basically the bonds that these banks bought to kind of get at least a little bit of interest start going down, and quite heavily so, right? I mean, at this point, like, some of these are like down 50%. And then that's not necessarily a problem, right? Because at the end of the day, you're still gonna get the money out of it, like, that you paid for it, right? Like, that's how bonds work. The problem is, if you have to sell it before maturity, you're gonna take that loss. And if they're worth half of what they were before, I mean, that's on your books. That's the bank that is gonna bleed. And if you then get on top, like, a bunch of people kind of like panicking and posting on social media, like a bunch of VCs, and you saw this in the last few days, they're like, oh, get all your money out, whatever. And then 50, 60, 70% of the money that the bank has just kind of disappears, um, or like tries to get out. Then they obviously have to sell everything, and they have to sell it at heavy losses. So they would technically, if no one would withdraw, they'd be fine. Most of the time anyway, like, if they didn't do like any kind of fraudulent shit, which, I mean, it's a bank, you could always expect that, to be honest. But like, they would be fine, right? But the moment people run for the hills, and the more people do it, the scarier it gets. And
Yes.
the discussion, basically, why people think that on Monday maybe we get more contagion, is because people are gonna see that, like, and I think the silver, and I always confuse the fucking two. I hate it. Silicon Valley
Yes.
Bank is, I think, the 16th largest bank
Yeah,
in
it's
the
like
US.
16th or 18th or something. It's pretty big.
Something around there, yeah. So if a bunch of people on Monday see, like, hey, this bank went tits up, right, and people are not gonna get paid out, they're gonna go to their bank and they're gonna be like, hey, I want my money.
Yes.
And that's the worry, because no bank can kind of survive this, right? Like, if you go, like, if 70% of the people that have money in that bank, or like if 70% of the money in the bank just gets withdrawn in a day or two, they're all gonna be in deep shit,
Yes.
right? So that's why a lot of people are actually speculating that this is gonna be stopped by the US government.
Yeah, the two mechanisms, just very quickly, to what would be, the intervening factors be? It would either be just like straight up taxpayer funded bailout via the government, that type of acquisition,
Yep.
or the second one is kind of another version of the first, where there's a private buyer, like a Citadel or a JP Morgan or someone else steps in and shores up the liquidity and acquires it and plugs the hole. But a lot of the time, via the revolving door, you'll have government representatives go to the private sector and give them a tap on the shoulder, and tell them, like,
Yeah.
hey, this is a good thing to do. Like famously, they sort of went to, I think it was Warren Buffett during the financial crisis, and others, about basically shoring up the cash, which they didn't, to my understanding. So it had to be government funded. But yeah, that's sort of, I think you've completely nailed it there. You've sort of preempted a question, which is, okay, fine, I understand the banks don't just hold your money and do nothing with it; they invest it. But if people want their money back, can't they just sell whatever they're investing into and give people their money back? The answer is yes in theory, no in practice, because the stuff they're investing into, especially in this type of interest rate requirement, they're going to be booking losses. They're going to be selling at bad prices, and they're just invested a lot of the time into now less liquid, non-cash equivalent garbage. So even if you gave them 100 and they invest that into something and you want your 100 back, they might, if they have to give it to you immediately, that demand for liquidity, maybe they only are able to sell it for 30, right?
Yeah, you could make an analogy. You could make an analogy to like stable coins, basically. Like they bought something that is supposed to be worth this amount, and like a stable coin that's like trading at 0.9 now. If no one runs for the hills, right, it's gonna go back to 1. If as long as it's run properly. But if you then like suddenly be like, okay, I don't want this, and you pull out, they're gonna have to take that loss, that difference, and that's gonna be bad for them, obviously. And it doesn't take too much of a loss, obviously, given the numbers we're talking about here, for the bank to just be like, hey, we cannot, like, this is too much.
Yeah, especially all at the same time. That's the issue, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and on the contagion point, I think you nailed it as well, which is essentially that if the market, if the week opens and they're looking at such a large bank and seeing no intervention, no bailout, whatever, think about the knock-on effect to like regional banks and much smaller commercial banks if they're seeing that the big boys aren't getting bailed out, essentially.
Yes.
So you're just going to see a copycat effect possibly across banks as a whole. And we're going to find a way to make that bullish, because then the Fed can't keep raising rates because they're breaking something. So we go back to something a bit less aggressive, and then we'll get one green candle out of that narrative. It's, to be honest, I feel that way. I feel similarly about the Bitcoin narrative, that like this is what Bitcoin is made for, and it's narratively very powerful. I think that's maybe something for the future, as long as we overcome like short to medium term correlations and sort of liquidity concerns, that like when the market really starts to pick up, it's like, oh, well, what's Bitcoin ever been good for? And then, 2, 3, 6, 12, 24 months down the line, we can point towards this and say, well, look, normal people, large banks in the US weren't able to give, literally went under. And their customers weren't able to make payroll, and they thought this FDIC insurance would protect them and that financial infrastructure was resilient, but they didn't really own any of their money. But with Bitcoin, you can, right?
Yes.
I feel like it's almost more powerful as a delayed narrative, because correlation plus liquidity constraints feel a bit heavy. It's similar to like the ETH merge proof of stake thing, right? To me, that was always like a deferred bullish narrative, that when we're in a different market regime and on-chain activity is like particularly high and consistently high, and we've hopefully developed some cool dApps and use cases, etc., then you have the shitty banks and their sell-side research reports talking about the merge and how deflationary it is and the flywheel effect, yada yada, as opposed to like an immediate impact of, proof of stake, therefore bullish, therefore number go up. It could be like a delayed narrative type of thing, but I would certainly welcome a more meaningful sort of apex moment decoupling. I'm just less certain of it.
The only positive that I can take out of all of this is that we're finally going to get at least a little bit of respite from all the attacks that we've been getting. Because, I mean, this just like, you have bigger fires in your fucking house.
Take the plank out of your own eye before taking the speck out of your brother's.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that was Jesus, right?
Yeah, it's from the Bible. I don't know if it's Jesus, but I know it's from the Bible.
Yeah, the New Testament, that'll do.
Yeah.
So that's that. I don't know if you want to troll through the rest of the news or finish off any altcoin thingies or just things.
I don't even want to talk about my
altcoins
too.
Fair enough.
Now we can talk about it. We can talk about it. People are curious.
I know, of course. Like ETH, the only thing is like it went to 1400, right? That weekly level.
Yeah.
And it looks like that weekly close has a higher chance of playing out than the BTC one, because 21 seems a bit steep for BTC for a weekend. Not mega puking any further is at least slightly more plausible for ETH, given it's above the level, whereas BTC is below. So I think that's something.
Yeah. I want to say like for the ETH weekly, right? Like I said, like if we close the weekly for Bitcoin above 21K, so that's looking much, much better. If ETH closes above the 2018 all-time high, right? And that's at like 1,520. If that weekly closes above there, it starts looking really, really, really good. It's a tall ask. It's like 4 or 5%. It's not necessarily out of the ordinary for like an altcoin to pump like 5% on a weekend. But like if we close above that level, it's basically also where the last dump stopped, right? The one on the 6th of February or the 13th of February, whatever candle you want to use. If we close above that level, I think the weekly USD chart is actually starting to look really, really good. And I'm going to rotate heavily into ETH. But still has to do a lot of work. If we close below it, I think it's the same situation as Bitcoin. As you just want to wait for it to close
But like,
above
which chart are you using for that? Because like the Coinbase, for example, the 2017, January 2018 chart.
Binance.
Ah, I see. Okay.
Yeah, Binance is pretty clean on that. I know that Coinbase isn't necessarily super accurate on that one, but like the Binance wick has been meaningful, at least.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah.
Before, so I like that a little bit. Obviously, you could just be a little bit even more cautious on this front and just say, hey, above 1.7k, like make new highs, and this just goes straight to 2.5.
Break out, but for real this time, please.
Yeah. So that's kind of my view on ETH. There's not really that much there.
Yeah.
One thing that I want to say, ETH BTC looks absolutely phenomenal. This is actually insane. Like everything else disappeared.
Stop! It's not moving, Don.
No. Just look at the comparison of everything else. Like my ETH bags have barely bled. Like I'm completely fine with my ETH bags. There's other bags that hurt my soul, right? But ETH's been very, very strong.
Hurt your soul. Sorry, go on.
I gladly don't have any of those. I do have a soul, but I don't have soul.
Right. You're missing the important one.
Anyway, but I like ETH BTC still. I think it's basically, I don't think you're gonna see much of like underperformance of ETH BTC. But we're heading into another kind of big news event, so maybe that'll change something. But I just like the chart. I disregarding all the news, I like the ETH BTC chart. Okay. Still, yeah. I mean, it's up this week. Yeah, it's crazy. True. It's absolutely insane. Like this has been one of the worst weeks in concerning news in a while. I mean, not necessarily in the longest while because we've had a really shitty year.
It's a tough competition, man. It's a fucking tough competition.
But I mean, it's insane that it's still holding like this. So yeah, I'm looking at ETH. I think it's interesting. With regards to, I don't know if you have anything to add on the ETH front.
I was just going to say, Don, all the sellers are staked and waiting for Shanghai. That's
so they can unstake and dump on us. Yes. Possible.
New FUD narrative just dropped.
I like it. Just FUD everything.
Yeah. No, I haven't got anything else to add on ETH. I think just this Bitcoin monthly is a lot clearer than most of this other shit. You know,
I agree. Like the charts on Bitcoin are just 10 times better than the ones on ETH.
Yeah, and ETH just puked through its daily. Right? Like, you know how we mentioned the Bitcoin daily is beaten up by breaking through everything. I think that applies to the ETH daily to a large extent, as far as how it reacted to the consolidation we've been in since January. So if you wanted to take your TA 101 basic shit, you just take the range low at like 1500, and if it reclaims that, at least you've got an invalidation and you're back inside the range. You know, I think that's fine. If you're gonna transfer the argument of where would you feel more comfortable saying. Sort of positioning following strength, at least a range low reclaim shouldn't be a tall order if this thing is anything other than a piece of shit. I just keep getting the thing that's keeping me up at night. My irrational fear is, you know, on the daily time frame, I just look to the left and see those 11 green candles, and I'm like, where's support? You know, like as far as daily time frame range, efficient, recent structure, I'm like, where's support? And yeah, if it leans that way, it wouldn't look great. No. But I just think the daily timeframes on BTC and ETH put next week in a precarious position where even if the initial impulse is good when it comes to news and risk off, etc., and it starts to rip, it just fucking rips into the underside of a bunch of daily resistances. So it's like, ugh, you know, that's not easy to say the least.
I think that's a very valid point.
I'm just gonna try to fade it and get run over. That's my plan.
I think if it goes above 1.5. 40 on ETH, like you said, that's starting to look really, really good. I mean, it's the same. It's the same setup, really. Like I think 1,530, like that all-time high from 2018 on the weekly. If we reclaim that on the weekly, it starts looking really good. And then you have the daily where it needs to close above that. And if you have both of that, fucking moon it until you have both of that. It's a tough call, right? You can just knife catch and pray to God, but the proper technical setup and the good trade, I think, is a little bit higher. As stupid as that sounds,
No,
and
I think it's reasonable.
I mean, I hate saying like, "Hey, buy higher," but it's just true. Like as a trader, like sometimes it's just better to buy higher. And in this case, I think it's quite clear on both Bitcoin and ETH that like the sensible trade and the trade where you can go heavy is a little bit higher. Then again, like I've been saying, like if you want to be dip buying on Bitcoin, there's no better place than between 19 and 20K. We hit exactly that, and we bounced from that so far, at least a little bit. So maybe that produces something, but I think in general, given everything that we've been going through, a little bit of strength would go a long way.
Yeah, at this desperate juncture, I agree. I also wouldn't be surprised if we spent a bit more time at this monthly cluster structure support thing, especially if this news nonsense, etc., has to wash through. Like, we spent a solid 2 months at monthly resistance at that range high. Well, was it a solid 2 months? Sort of. It was like maybe one, if I'm just looking at the weekly, we first really rallied into the range high on the 23rd of January, and the reaction came in basically yesterday / a couple of days ago. So it's like a month and a half, couple of months, basically long enough. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw something similar as far as that 1920 cluster goes. Maybe you get a mechanical bounce first on some of that FUD being lifted, and then sort of retesting it, and maybe the monthly close will be telling. At least that's a close I'm going to take seriously, because again, that's simply it's been rewarding as far as that specific time frame goes. And it's also the good thing there is, like, someone asked, I think it was a reply to the chart I posted with that monthly, like, oh well, what do you do if it sort of closes below that monthly cluster, and then you're bearish, and then it reclaims it, etc., etc. First of all, why the fuck is that a concern? Like, it closes below, and let's say I lost money or whatever if I took a bet on it, and then it closes back above. Well, then I just have a different setup with a clearer invalidation. I don't necessarily see what the issue is, because essentially the question is, what if you don't get it right first time? And the answer is, I don't care.
It should happen, sir.
Exactly, right? But the technical objection aside, I think there's a more interesting observation that the monthly time frame just doesn't give that many fake out signals, man. Especially when it comes to closes, it just really doesn't fuck around. So if it closes above, I'll take that pretty seriously. If it closes below, I'll also take that pretty seriously, and I'll be open to that being some sort of failed close fake out candle, but there just isn't a ton of evidence to support that on the monthly time frame. And when there is, it's like a giga signal, like the Pico top at 69K or whatever. On the alt front, dude, the only useful thing to say on the alt front is that Altcoin Thursdays has got to go. Like,
just remove it, dude. It's cost me too much money. Just remove it.
That show has really got to go. Like, there's something particularly cursed about it. I know there's some Thursday seasonality stats someone posted about how it's just not a good day for crypto in general. So maybe that's my fault for choosing it, but there's some nasty witch level confluence going on with Altcoin Thursdays and Thursday seasonality and just the news flow and everything else. Even if I try my utmost and avoid talking about altcoins specifically, even if I FUD them and say that Bitcoin's at resistance, I'm not going to touch altcoins, sorry, let's do some educational stuff, nothing is good enough. It just fucking vanishes. So that's something for us to think about strongly for our content schedule going forward.
No, I mean, we just keep it, and then we charge people to remove it, and maybe I'll get like 1/10 of my losses back.
Yes.
It's just by using that money. That's the good fundraising strat.
A highly profitable trading strategy. But there is a useful lesson from altcoins, though, Don, that you don't ignore round number meme resistance.
Oh, I've not learned my lesson.
No,
I just want to say.
Not. Do you still think, like, one of the arguments you were making was like halving related LTC BTC grind up? If I had to summarize by waving my arms around what the Litecoin argument would look like, it'd be some synthesis of those. Do you care about either of those, or is it just like, lol, this weekly just fucking crushed everything? Fuck off. I hate alts. I tricked myself. Good night.
I mean, the funny thing is, I still have a bunch. Like Litecoin, I still have. I traded it around. Like I mitigated some losses, but I would not even say not even close to half of what I did. The thing is, like, I bought it at 60 for like a long-term play, right? And I was like, if we close the weekly below 77, that's where I'd be like, that's a good like invalidation. Now we're gonna close the weekly below 77.
You
So
never
I'm
know,
gonna.
King.
I mean, that I would love that, obviously. But I'll see what I'll do. This is why, like, especially yesterday, where I wasn't so sure how I would want to kind of treat that position, because the Bitcoin position is pretty simple to me. The ETH position is pretty simple to me. Litecoin just completely vanished, basically. I mean, it went from 60 to 100, which was really great, and it went from 100 to basically almost 60 again in no time whatsoever. So I just wanted to kind of get a clear head of it. So I'm going to decide that basically tomorrow, what I'm going to do with this position. Obviously, like on the USD pair, that's not great. It's just basically, it broke the support that it needed to hold. It's not good. And on the Bitcoin pair, it broke the range to the downside. Which, I mean, that's just not a good combination. And in comparison to a lot of other things, like ETH, for example, that's been just underperforming. So I'm like not a little bit, I'm disappointed in the position. Fuck Charlie Lee. I'm still in profit. So like I mean, I don't know. Like I'll see what I do, but I mean, I'm not gonna necessarily change my plans just based on the fact that I like to hold it. So if we don't get a massive push tomorrow on Bitcoin that kind of rescues this thing above 77, I'm gonna look for an exit probably down the line somewhere. And yeah, one interesting bit is that before all of this went down, before everything went to zero, I bought a bunch of XRP, right? Because obviously, and the funny thing is, it's actually not down, which is very, very confusing to me.
You
It's
bought like all
exactly.
the coins you know about as far as altcoins go, like Litecoin, XRP, ETH in your mind, and that's it.
I mean, the thing with XRP is quite funny because everything's down on the week, right? Like if you go on CoinMarketCap, like
Oh yeah,
everything's
yeah.
down like huge, and then you scroll down the list and you see like XRP is down 2%, and it's just like a little bit of an odd one. But yeah, I'll see how I'll treat that position as well going into next week.
Bro, I
I'm
hate this
not
chart. I can't even
what the
pretend it's
XRP chart.
technical or it's something. I don't know, man. Like
Oh
looking at
yeah,
that
it's
weekly, it's just like, you know, it was a shitty narrow range. Burj Khalifa through the range, and now it's just doing the same thing again.
yeah, it's not pretty. I basically I won, and I mean this is public rumors. It's not like I got insider information, but basically they're kind of going heads to heads with the SEC, and that's gonna come out pretty soon. And I saw the relative strength that was going on there, so I just bought it. So far I haven't, like, there's no loss on that front, but obviously like it's a little bit of a dicey situation with everything else. So I don't want to shill anyone in that position, but I mean, I'm glad that's like I was like, oh, I bought XRP at 0.37. The next thing I look at the charts and Bitcoin's down like 10%. And I was like, oh fuck. Not only did I get myself into a shitty position, maybe I got other people into too, but so far that's at least been being somewhat decent. But yeah, that's like on the altcoin front. Like if you just scroll through the list, I mean, even Lido is down 10% today. There's major loss in confidence, I think. It's funny because I was like on my last show on this channel, I was like, if Lido goes to $2, I'd be interested in buying it. That's the absolute peak of bottom. I didn't buy it because I was like, I've already bought enough.
I've done enough buying.
Got myself into enough trouble. But that's one that I'm gonna watch also going into the weekly close. But the altcoin front is just very, very rough, and I think Bitcoin and ETH being so clear makes it so much easier to just focus on them. Besides, like it's easy to get kind of lost in the altcoin world right now, because you can like you can be like, oh, this support maybe, or this resistance or whatever. But at the end of the day, they're gonna follow what Bitcoin and ETH do, in to a large extent, and they've been underperforming ETH like across the board. So it's a little bit of a tough one.
I'm just so glad we were vocally sort of trolling the China AI coin narrative, because that
yeah.
was so dumb, honestly. Like, especially looking at these charts now,
Oh yeah.
it sweetens the deal. But like that was so dumb. Like I don't have. Listen, for those waiting for some sort of sophisticated elaboration, well, first of all, I'm generally incapable of that. But on this occasion specifically, I've got nothing to add. It's like at a certain point, you need to stop making shit up. Do you know what I mean? And like at least
Yeah.
put some effort into your fiction. And that one was, yeah, when you see, I mean, I guess the pedagogical point is sometimes when altcoin narratives are clear, you don't need someone to like shield them to you, because you'll just fucking look at the market and the same sector or same couple of coins or the same hot ball of money or the same rotation just keeps absolutely printing. And also,
Yeah.
it's down, barely down on red days and mega up on green days. It's so self-evident and self-explanatory. You don't need a fucking DeFi tweet thread telling you what Chinese coins Chinese people think Americans think Chinese people are buying. You know, like if you're getting to that level of contrivance, then you probably don't have anything particularly solid on your hands. And also, it's look, it's just all, as you mentioned, directionally correlated basket of garbage. When the volatility machine gets turned on, you know, relative strength, this, that, and the other, outperformance, hedge, just kind of goes out the window, doesn't it? It's all
Yeah.
collateral at the end of the day.
I think there's one big signal that you can take and where you want to get out, and it's like when someone shows Neo to you. It's because it's always the fucking top. Like it was in 2017,
Yeah,
18.
yeah.
I mean, it was the coin that made me most of my money
Same
back
Neo,
then.
yeah. Ant shares to Neo, man.
Oh, I fucking like that made my career, like literally, because I mean I had like a bunch of money, like made a bunch of money trading, and then I was like, fuck it, this is like such a clear narrative, right? This is so easy. This trade has to be done basically, like before the rebrand from Armchairs to Neo. And then also you had this narrative that because Eve back then had the same problems, like it was fucking expensive. I was like, oh, I'm just gonna go all in this
Yeah,
shit, right?
Chinese Ethereum, you stake your gas, and yeah, amazing.
Yeah, it had like a bunch of shit that other coins didn't have. You had like the Ponzinomics with the gas staking, all that kind of shit,
So
right?
good. Ahead of its time, some might say.
Oh, ahead, like so
A
ahead of its time.
pioneer in shitcoining, yeah.
And then I dumped it. I still remember like vividly dumping it like 100, 110 or something. And then it went to 200 and was so fucking mad. Like I was like, this is so stupid. Like if I just kept it, I could have just retired on the spot. Because I was like, I was all in from that, like to that point. And I was like, I mean, I took it to 100. If I took it to 200, I mean, that would have been a big deal, right? Because another 2x at the top is big.
Yes.
And then it's just fucking cratered and went to basically zero.
Yeah.
And then the next cycle, people were trying to make it up again, but like the jig was up, right? Because there was such a huge Neo community that suffered through the whole bear market, right? They were all holding, but still in 2018, 2019, and throughout 2022. Because they were like, oh, we're staking, like this is still gonna be big. And whenever you have like a lot of back holders still in a coin, the next cycle is gonna be brutal, right? Because then you get like stuff going up, and a bunch of people will obviously buy this laggard, and the back holders are just gonna mercilessly sell into you because they've been waiting for this for years. And so I think like it's funny, but it's true. Like every time Neo goes up quite a bit, the market just disappears.
Yeah, Zcash, Link, Flippening. There are so many like oddly consistent asynchronous signals that you can find that have a very high strike rate. Conferences, for fuck's sake.
Oh yeah.
I mean, yeah, there's alpha there for sure. Yeah. So for me, alts aren't. I mean, look, I've been keeping an eye on Matic because it's getting a lot of attention on social media, among other things. There's a decent weekly level actually, just around $1, which was kind of the 8th of August highest close, which had a failed breakout and then is coming back now for a rounded retest. And it's also just the range high if you want to use $1 as your range high, and then the lowest close at either 70 cents, like 76, 74 cents, whatever, as your range low. At least it's back at some sort of level after 3 weeks of straight selling. So that's kind of on my watch list-ish. But other than that, I'd rather look at whether the economy is going to collapse on Monday and the clearer BTC and ETH levels rather than shitcoining with particular enthusiasm. Should we coast through the remaining headlines and then wrap up?
Oh, there's more.
Believe it or not, yeah.
Yeah, send it.
So, I mean, we talked about this in passing. Coinbase halts conversion between US dollars and USDC, and news comes after Silicon Valley Bank collapse, and Circle said it had 3.3 billion in exposure in the failed bank, and so Coinbase just closed it while the banks were closed, according to their explanation. That sort of carries the implication that it'll open on Monday. I think that remains to be seen. I'm sure there's some sort of Coinbase Circle, bunch of other partners, war room going on at the moment. So we'll
Yeah.
see. We'll see how that gets resolved. But yeah, people were printing on that ARB, and then they had to close it off as well because they probably don't want all that exposure, especially with a lack of knowledge.
Yeah, the problem is there. I think if they do it and they run out of cash,
Yes, yes.
then it's just straight up zero, right? And the moment the stablecoin goes to zero, you have a problem because it's not gonna go back.
Bad things happen. I think that's fair to say.
Which I don't know why like people see this at such certainty. Like I've seen a bunch of people be like, okay, the Monday it's gonna open and it's gonna vanish. Pretty much every smart person that I've talked to, and I wouldn't count myself in that.
Or me, apparently. We haven't discussed this.
Has been kind of like, this is like pretty shitty situation, but it's a good chance that they get out of it. I mean, that's kind of my gut feeling too. But if you have everything in something and you only have to take like a 5% haircut, and it's at risk of going to zero, I mean, that's something that makes sense to kind of think about, right? I'm not recommending to do it. I mean, like I said, I bought a bunch, and it's up a little bit now, not too much, but a little bit. But yeah, I think both sides give valid criticism about the other side, right? Because there's a bunch of people that are like, hey, you should be buying this because I mean it's just stupid fun. And then there's the other side where they're like, hey, you guys are giving really shit advice because a bunch of people have all their money in USDC and don't know what to do. And I think there's both of those criticisms are actually valid. So
Yeah. And look, it's also this difficulty that when you see USDC trading at like, it was trading sub 90 cents on the dollar. And then you have to always ask yourself this difficult question. Is this just idiots panicking, or does someone know something?
Yeah.
That's the, you know, there are two main dilemmas, it feels like, in crypto. One is it leading or is it lagging? You know, is it like the relative strength thing versus lag? And then the other one is, does someone know something that I don't, or are idiots being particularly idiotic at this juncture?
Yeah, because you make money when idiots do stupid shit.
Yes.
But you lose a shitload of money if someone knows something
Exactly.
that you don't.
Like they're complete opposites of each other with completely, fully divergent outcomes. So yeah, that's always fun.
Because something like I saw, like when I went to bed, I think I saw USDC trade at like 99, 98. And people like, oh, look at these idiots. They're shorting USDC on Bybit and the funding is like 0.2. Like you're getting paid a shitload just to buy USDC. And I'm like, well, I wake up and it's at 0.88. Those people that took that and paid the funding probably will not be complaining, right? So like it's not necessarily always as straightforward as people would like to
100%.
make you think.
And funding is another example, right? When you see really skewed funding, like, is someone just really dumb and willing to pay a lot of money to fade, or is it, you know, some sort of informed flow willing to be aggressive because they know the payoff for that trade?
Oh yeah, because I mean, funding on USDC versus USDT on Bybit, right? At 0.9 was like you paid 0.1 per hour, actually, I think, to have that. And it went from 0.9 to 0.94. That's quite significant of a gain. And it was against the funding, right? Like if you like go to Common Belief and you're like, hey, this funding is like massively big, this should go down. I mean, well, you lost a bunch of money, right?
Yes.
You made your 0.1% in funding, but this shit went up 4%, right?
Well, like in every bull market, when funding is high, it's like, oh, careful. It's like, no, everyone just wants to be long. Relax, bro. The funding discussion is always really hilarious because like it's either someone really dumb willing to pay a lot of money to be dumb, or someone really smart willing to pay a lot of money to be right. And there's almost no middle outcome.
Yeah, there's almost never anything that actually makes sense. The thing is with the funding, I think the best signal that funding gives is when it's heavily skewed negative. Like if you see something that you actually think is not going to go to zero. So for example, if Bitcoin funding is heavily negative, that's almost always a buy in very, very short amount of time. Doesn't mean the buy is good that second, but it's gonna be good in the next like almost always 24 to 48 hours. And the same is true for like ETH and like a lot of other things.
All the altcoin squeezes we saw as well
Yeah,
early on.
like you get like a bunch of like really really negative funding. That's a trade that I'm like willing. There's a lot of alpha there. Just a bunch of people being very very stupid. With positive funding, especially when prices go up, like you said, it's a little bit of a different story, because people are gladly like they're gonna gladly pay like 1 or 2 or 3% of the position if they know this thing is gonna rip 50% and they just want to get more of it. So that has to be like you have to be a little bit um, you have to differentiate between circumstances in this instance.
Yeah, for sure. And in my pinned tweet, I do have a note that I wrote about funding, open interest, divergence. So if anyone's interested in that, go check it out. We'll wrap up on the USDC section at the very least. I saw a good tweet from DGen Spartan, which says, you hold USDC, 4 main options. Most people do not have option number 1, and the 4 options are redeem directly. Option 2 is swap to USD / another stable and book the current L. So whatever the discount is between USDC and whatever other stable coin you swap into. 3, swap to crypto and take on market risks. That'd be like buying BTC, ETH, altcoins, or whatever. And number 4, hold USDC and hope the Circle cartel has a plan. And I think that's a really good way of thinking about it in terms of the decision tree. So that was good. And then sort of related to that, when we talked about stuff breaking as a result of a lot of these DeFi protocols and other bits of crypto infrastructure pricing USDC at $1. I mean, how dare they, Don, right? Assume their stable coin is going to be worth $1. But there were changes to Bybit's USDC collateral value because they had unified trading accounts based off of that. And so following the adjustment, the collateral value of USDC will be dependent on the market price of USDC, which is ironic because the whole point of having linear futures and unified sort of trading accounts and collateral is that it's supposed to make the maths of it very easy. You kind of just have this thing called USDC, and then so hedging and knowing your deltas and risk management is supposed to be a really simple process, certainly compared to the convexity of inverse futures, for example. But then if your stable coin is unstable, then it's almost like a shitty inverse future. Like, I don't know, it turns to shit. It's not great. And there was some chat about Compound doing the same and DYDX in terms of being affected and hard coding USDC as being worth $1. The audacity, Dom, to think of those terms. And then
funny.
The final tweet I've also got here as far as this topic or adjacent to this topic goes is from Quant_XBT, who says the recent depeggings caught many market makers off guard. Order books are thin and are likely to become thinner. Be safe. So also kind of complements what we spoke about with regard to weekend price action, the open, and also altcoins. I think that's just been the case when the big people get carried out in the market and there's large uncertainty. You might want to read into big moves as, oh, look, this is great strength or great weakness, but a lot of the time it just means thin books more than anything else.
And something that I want to say to great strength or great weakness is you might be sitting here wondering, like, hey, we had like USDC go to 0.88. We had massive FUD. Why is Bitcoin not down a lot? And the answer, and I mean, it was kind of hinted at in the DGen Spartan tweet, is that a bunch of people basically, like, there's a lot of fear in the market that this blows up, so a bunch of people will sell. But there's also a bunch of people that are sitting on stables that are going to have to buy, right? Because they're like, I don't want to have the stable exposure. So it kind of balances itself out. You have these people that are terrified that the market is going to crash because, I mean, valid concern, like you have a bunch of shit going on. But then you also have the other group of people on the other side of the trade that are terrified that their stable coins are going to go to zero. So they're going to buy, the other side is going to sell, and that more often than not equals out somewhat. We had these kind of situations before. For the people that have been around 2018 in the bear market, we had the Tether FUD, and Tether dropped by more than 10%. And the cool thing back then was that a bunch of people just bought Bitcoin, a lot of it, because back then it was harder to do anything else with your Tether. There was like, I mean, the only thing that you can do is buy Bitcoin, and Bitcoin rallied by like 10%, which was quite nice because back then I was actually in a long and I got pretty lucky on that front. I was like, oh shit, like FUD hit. And then next thing I look and my long's like 10% in profit. And back then 10% was huge because it just didn't move. That didn't happen this time. And I think it's because you have other avenues to get in and out, and you can swap easier. But the cool thing back then was that a bunch of people just bought Bitcoin, a lot of it, because back then it was harder to do anything else with your Tether. There was like, I mean, the only thing that you can do is buy Bitcoin. which makes the market more efficient, but sadly takes away a little bit of the fun. But yeah, I just wanted to explain the fact that, like, if you're wondering, like, hey, is this massive strength that we're seeing here because it's a big news event? It's a bunch of people buying with their stables, and it's a bunch of people freaking out. So I wouldn't take it as
Into
anything.
emptier books than usual. Which
Exactly.
definitely helps matters. Yeah, no, it's good to have that microstructure backdrop so you can sort of have a relative understanding of the moves. US DOJ appeals $1 billion Binance US acquisition of Voyager assets. Another appeal, Don. So the New York Bankruptcy Court signed off on Binance US's plan to purchase Voyager's distressed assets. But of course, the Voyager rollercoaster has to continue. And so the government is making an effort to block the $1 billion deal, and they're going to appeal the decision. So more limbo and purgatory for Voyager. Dude, I can't. It's the same with BlockFi, right? Like the BlockFi rollercoaster never ends because they had like 230 million or something.
Oh, it was 300 something.
Yeah, it's
I
like a
think.
bunch of their money in this Silicon Valley Bank thing. So dude,
Yeah, the one that went back. The one
man,
that
these
went
companies
first.
are cursed. I swear to God, right?
Oh,
Like, just can't catch a break.
No, it's
unreal.
horrendous. One funny thing that I want to mention is that you had, like, when Silvergate went down, right? And it's not really a funny occurrence, but when it went down, you had a bunch of these shitty politicians being like, this crypto bank went down, and like we need to regulate them harder. And then next thing you know, the 16th largest bank in America goes fucking down, and they had good ratings too. It's not like anyone was warning about this, so it just goes to show, like, and there's no tweets, obviously. Just goes to show how kind of like two-faced all this. Like, it's a fucking farce. They're just using, like, people hate something and they just use whatever they can find, and it's really fucking
Yeah, the
annoying.
cherry
I
picking
hate that.
is
Yeah.
definitely strong. So yeah, good luck to our Voyager and BlockFi brothers and sisters, but I don't envy your journey. I'll say that much.
No.
New York sues KuCoin, claims. Hold on, where's this?
Oh, the ETH security thing, huh?
Yes. New York sues KuCoin, claims Ether is an unregistered security. This led to a bit of a nuke in the short to medium term. Certainly didn't help matters as far as price action goes. And they did that thing where they just shoved ETH next to like Luna and USDT. So it's
Yeah,
like
great.
take the average dude who hates crypto and put all his favorite sort of coins to talk shit about, understandably, at least on the Luna front, into one place. And yeah, this seems like an overreach to me. And just because one attorney general in one state, yes, New York is sort of politically important, but there's a lot of precedent. I mean, this is going to be highly litigated, and especially because the CFTC, like, there's other precedent to suggest that ETH is not a security and that it's a commodity, and we know that there's been an ongoing tug of war in between the CFTC and the SEC as far as who has jurisdiction over regulating Bitcoin and ETH at the very least.
Yeah.
So this isn't like a straightforward thing. I saw some interpretations, just straight up tweets being like, NYAG says ETH is a security, therefore it's a security, and that's just not how it works at all. I wish it were that simple. But this definitely doesn't really help matters, because we know the SEC already was kind of mumbling. They really don't like staking, as we've seen in some of the headlines we discussed on other shows. And now this is kind of adding to that pile of the argument that ETH/staking and that entire transition to proof of stake isn't everyone's favorite. I hope ETH isn't a security. That would be pretty awful for just about everyone. It's like you end up castrating just a large part of the crypto ecosystem of like ETH specifically, but also just like staking in general and proof of stake. And if that whole thing just gets bundled together as, yeah, this is a security, even if it's ETH itself, which is quite different from a bunch of shit ICO, IDO, whatever things, if they all get put into the same category, that would be rather unfortunate.
I mean, the only thing that wouldn't be a security at that point would be Bitcoin.
Yes, exactly. And even that can't get an ETF. So I mean, what good is that, right? Yeah, so I think the sort of in the article it talks about some back and forth in terms of, yeah, well, this is just the one state's attorney general. Federal action would be more telling, and then it also mentions the whole CFTC SEC thing. But yeah, just more bearish FUD, frankly, And I think this is going to be a recurring and ongoing topic. The whole ETH status as a commodity versus security. Is staking, does an asset have offering staking and protocols and exchanges offering that? Are they offering security? Is that securities offering? I don't think that argument is going anywhere anytime soon. It actually seems very hot as a topic of litigation. So we'll find out. But needless to say, anything that comes down harshly on that side would be pretty fucking bearish. Yeah, I didn't agree with the legal argument made here, but we'll let the big boys fight each other on it. This is just a bit more lighthearted. Top 50 cryptocurrencies volatility is predictable, and digital assets behave more like equities. Report. After analyzing the 50 largest cryptocurrencies, the Risk Protocol said it has created sophisticated statistical models to more accurately predict volatility. And then this amazing insight, Don, something we've never talked about and isn't self-evident in the slightest: hedging that works in traditional finance might make things worse in crypto, according to the company's CEO. Authors of perhaps the most exhaustive study ever done on the volatility of cryptocurrencies say that they can now more accurately predict the intense swings gripping the digital asset market. It's like, mate, just come over to my place for a cup of tea. I'll tell you, they pump together and dump together, and there's some dispersion on that side of things, but all this shit converges to one. You know, the fact that we can think of Chainlink as like the one outlier over over like 5-6 years that didn't play ball with that. Yeah, I don't know, man. I'm sure there are some good insights in this paper. But like, look, some of the report's key takeaways: investors can't necessarily hedge long underlying crypto exposure by being long volatility. Yes, fine, understandable. The fickle nature of crypto is strongly predictable. I'm not even going to pretend that's an insight. Between 2020 and 2022, the return correlation became positive between NASDAQ and Bitcoin. Fine. And before 2019, there was no significant correlation between Bitcoin gains and broader stock market returns. Fine. And the idea that you can't hedge in crypto using crypto, that's been just the most self-evident thing for anyone who's spent a day looking at a watch list, maybe. So, I mean, thank you for your research, the Risk Protocol, but Christ. Maybe we should write some of these papers, man. I'm sure there's stuff that we've forgotten about that would make for fascinating study.
Oh yeah, I think in general it's so obvious when you see non-crypto people write something about crypto. It's like you're like, how can this be like anything that anyone talks about? Like there's 100 experts on CT, like degens that don't do anything but trade on 100x leverage.
Yes, literally
to explain
femboy
this better.
anime farm
Yes.
animals who get it, you know.
Yeah, it's quite funny.
But it's fine. At least we're closer to Jeff Dorman's carnival thesis with every day of news done. We're really getting fucking close.
Oh, I don't want to get me off this wild ride.
I know, it's bad. Speaking of shitty studies, by the way, Paxos survey shows 75% of respondents confident in the future of crypto. I just read the headline and I was like, there's no way this is serious, right? And just think about the study design here for a moment. 3/4 of those surveyed by the firm were confident or somewhat confident in the future of the crypto space. About 20% purchased crypto for the first time in the previous 12 months. And then of 5,000 US-based working age adults surveyed, 75% remained confident or somewhat confident in the future of crypto. The survey occurred 5th of January and 6th and included adults earning over $50,000 who had a bank account and who purchased crypto in the past 3 years. So you're asking people who purchased crypto, and presumably a lot of them, if not most of them, are holding it, whether the price of crypto is going to go up or whether it has a good future. It's like, could you pick a worse sample than that? Because by definition, if you thought it was shit and it didn't have a future, you wouldn't be buying it / holding it, right?
I mean, it's like asking a bag holder if the coin's good.
Yes,
like, what the fuck are you doing?
You go into the Coins Telegram and say, so, you guys optimistic for the future? It's like, nah, I think this is the worst project ever. I just spend all my time in here and spend all my money on it as well.
Honestly, when people say that and this happens every bear market, when people are actually like, no, dude, don't buy. Like, we just fucking hate our lives. That's a good entry signal, if anything.
Sure, for sure. When they become self-aware.
Yeah, when they're like, dude, we're just bag holders. Just leave. Don't be like us.
Oh, man. So, you know, at least we know the crypto research space is more competitive than ever recently. You can't hedge using coins, and if you buy coins, you think they'll go up. Fucking hell. Someone start handing out Nobel Prizes.
The only hedge that you can have is working at McDonald's, dude.
Correct.
Like, it's like common knowledge.
Yes, exactly. And becoming a Telegram community manager and getting some sort of stipend, usually in tokens, which just makes
that goes to
worse.
0.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Not going to spend too much time on this. Mt. Gox registration and repayment deadlines pushed back again. Ugh, like this is... I'm sure we could find 10 articles like this in the last 6 years or whatever. Hopefully this is the most recent one. But yeah, this is like one of the FUD-ish narratives hanging over the market, that Gox coins plus Shanghai plus CPI. Thankfully, we've outdone ourselves and we now have Circle plus financial crisis plus banking. So it doesn't seem as scary given what we've... sort of brewed for ourselves, but yeah, just more delays on Gox. Fine, not super interesting, but worth being aware of, just because there was that FUD confluence coming up for this month. I do want to end with a few meme/optimistic ones. Three in specific. Coinbase announces wallet as a service product to simplify Web3 onboarding. Like Coinbase seems to be kind of doing cool stuff, right? Like comparatively, like the NFT project was a disaster, but now they, for example, launched their base layer 2, so like crypto native tech to make it accessible to their retail punters, and now a wallet for Web3 stuff as well that'll hopefully stop people from getting spammed, phished, hacked as easily. So it's kind of nice to see Coinbase actually building out infrastructure versus being a place where retail punters just go and buy and get wrecked, you know? So especially with their position in the market, their technical expertise, how long they've been around, it's nice to see them take the tech and onboarding side seriously.
Yeah, at least something positive there, because what they've been doing is bleeding out users out of their fees, because the fees been horrendous for every retail user, and then they wonder, like, they buy and they're down like 10%. They wonder why. I mean, it's obviously not that bad, but almost.
And they
almost
nuked
feels
Coinbase
like that.
Pro. Well, GDAX was based, and Coinbase Pro was pretty good as well. You know,
Yeah,
like
but Coinbase itself, Jesus
yeah,
Christ,
not
just bleeding out of your ass.
not
if you use
competitive at all. But yeah, hopefully a step in the right direction.
Yep.
Yuga Labs Bitcoin NFT auction concludes amid complaints about its method. So we talked kind of about Bitcoin NFTs and whether it's cringe or necessary and all that type of stuff. Fine. Did you hear about how they conducted the auction? So you basically had to send your bid to an address,
Yes.
and they take custody of the Bitcoin with a promise.
And then they send it back if you don't get it.
That's so funny. It's legit a quote. They are taking custody of bidders' Bitcoin with a promise to send back unsuccessful bids. You send me one coin, I'll send you two back.
Yeah.
Yeah, fucking hell, it's the same thing. I mean, look, it is funny on its face. Actually fucking hilarious, because it literally just sounds like a scam DM, the type 10 of which, dozens of which we get every day. But it is understandable given the infrastructure. Like, we take smart contracts infrastructure for granted as far as ETH goes and all that kind of stuff goes, and it works and we're sort of used to it. So this seems super primitive, but that's only because our baseline is ETH. Whereas for Bitcoin, this is pretty fucking sophisticated, right?
Yep.
Give me your coins and I'll bid for you or whatever. I don't know, man. I'm gonna find it very hard to care about Bitcoin NFTs.
I think
yeah.
I think it's cool. I mean, if ETH's the security, maybe we're all gonna trade NFTs on Bitcoin.
And as we said, if it fixes the security model and people pay for block space and they create demand that way, do whatever the fuck you want. Just make sure the orange coin doesn't go to zero, you know?
Yes. I mean, as long as the orange coin doesn't go to zero and trends to infinity, I'm down.
Awesome. Final one. Gordon Ramsay's sandbox avatar NFTs coming to the metaverse. What the fuck is that collection of words? Man, it's so sad. Like, it's so clear to me that even in the depths of the bear market, like Web3 NFT crypto is where celebrities just come to milk their audience for their last bits of cash in the worst economy in decades, you know?
Yeah.
It's like all these rappers and celebrities and TikTok stars and MMA fighters, fucking Habib doing some metaverse thing as well. It's like, guys, what are you doing? Like, don't tarnish your legacies with this shit. But it also just shows what they think of the space, right? The fact that, you know, how much do they really care or value or take seriously their audience in the crypto kind of space in general, if with zero prior experience and usually no interest whatsoever in the infrastructure or anything else, understandably, it's just where every single celebrity from A to Z tier just shows up to grab a bit of money and fuck off. I can't wait for my turn, but for now I'll be critical.
Yeah, I mean, I would have the best kind of motive. Like, I mean, I'm a duck. Yes. I could sell duck NFTs. That would do well. But fuck no.
Yeah,
only if my trades go as poorly as they have in the last few weeks for a little bit longer.
If this is a new trend, yeah.
Yeah.
But it just felt like Metaverse specifically was like so bad. That was like late cycle Web3 sort of tail end garbage, you know?
Yeah.
And nothing really came of it. It just feels like Metaverse was the thing that if you were trying to scam people with your NFT roadmap before rugging the money and going to Dubai, you just put Metaverse in there alongside with like game, token, staking, and any other buzzword you can think of remotely adjacent to Web3, and then you take the money and then you know, island time, basically. And you know, some of these games that have metaverses and all that type of stuff, it just feels like we're a long way off anything that's not embarrassing.
Yeah, it's a little bit sad, but I think it's not necessarily like the more this happens, right? The more people are gonna look at NFTs at least, and I hope they find something that they like. I hope they don't just focus on the fact that they got scammed. I mean, a lot of people did the same with Bitcoin, right? They got scammed, or like something happened, someone shilled them into something. I mean, if you get shilled into anything, really, it's usually the top, right? If you've not heard of something and then you suddenly hear of it, it's usually the top. But a lot of these people stick around, right? So I just hope that all of this kind of promotion of shitty projects will lead to people actually sticking around in the crypto sphere. And not just be discouraged. I don't know what's going to happen in that regard. Could be both, right? Probably is going to be both. Like half of the people are just going to be like, fuck crypto,
Yes.
fuck NFTs, and the other half is going to be like, maybe there's something there that's actually quite cool.
Yeah, they get scammed and find some friends or something, and other people that got scammed, and maybe they don't get scammed together later. Yeah, it's tricky. It's like when our onboarding mechanism is fucking people over.
It's great, huh?
It's kind of rough.
Looking for exit liquidity along the way.
Yes, please join. That's all we've got, Don. Quite a long episode, but it's not like there's been any shortage of things that have happened and that needed discussing. So I think we've done a decent overview, and the market's been moving up during the course of this episode as well,
which is great.
So we'll take credit for that, obviously. Any final notes, questions, concerns, comments, existential fears?
I mean, my girlfriend's already complaining that she's had to keep the food on the heater for like on the stove for like 15-20 minutes. So I'm gonna run
for you. I really hope you make it through.
I hope I don't get beaten up too badly, but
for sure.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, that's us. That's Casual Friday. We're almost at 50k subs. If you want to help us out, click that subscribe button. Leave us a like, because that apparently does non-trivial things for YouTube algorithm discovery, whatever things. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Let's see how the Bitslato contagion affects the broader economy, especially the US banking sector, on Monday. And we will be there with our usual deluge of content next week. Don, thank you. To everyone else, we'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.